Well, we want to welcome you. My name's George Cohen. We've had a great Army Day so far, even better this afternoon. Got a distinguished panel here. If you had a chance to be at the Eisenhower luncheon, you heard a great speech from the chief, and our Army is really ready and getting stronger every day. So thank you very much for joining us for this ILW Contemporary Military Forum entitled Building America's Army, A Call to Service. As your professional association, the Association of the United States Army's Institute of Land Warfare is proud to provide forums like this one throughout the year that broaden the knowledge base of Army professionals and those who support our Army. This is the 5th ILW Contemporary Military Forum over the course of the 3 days. These professional development seminars are AUSA's way of amplifying the U.S. Army's narrative to audiences inside the Army and to help further the association's mission to be the voice for the Army, support for the soldier. AUSA relies on its members to help tell the Army story and to support our soldiers and their families. A strong membership base is vitally important for our advocacy efforts in Congress, the Pentagon, and the Defense Industrial Base, as well as to the public in communities across the country through AUSA's 123 local chapters. So at this time, we'd like to recognize our members. Thereby, if you are an AUSA member, please stand to be recognized, and we'd like to give you a round of applause, please. Very much. Now, the quid pro quo here is for those of you, Army professionals, who are not yet members of your professional association, we encourage you to join AUSA by visiting the AUSA membership booth, booth 307 in the Exhibit Hall A, or you can sign up online at ausa.org/membership. And if you're already a member, again, we thank you for staying with us. Enough banging on by me. I'm going to turn this panel over to General Palmer, who will introduce our guests and take over. So, Pete, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks all of you for joining us this afternoon. The title is Building America's Army, A Call to Service, and as we all know, everybody likes their toys and their tanks and stuff, but the real basis for the Army is our soldiers. And we're going to have a great panel today to discuss the topics and initiatives that are going on today, and I'd like to introduce the panel right now. The panel lead is General Townsend, Commander, United States Training and Doctrine Command. Mr. Williams, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Major General Muth, Commander, U.S. Army Recruiting Command. Sergeant Major Gooden, Commander, Sergeant Major is U.S. Training and Doctrine Command. Major General Evans is the Commander of U.S. Army Cadet Command, and Major General Frost, Commander, U.S. Army Center for Initial Military Training. Sir?
Thanks, Pete. Is that already working?
Yeah, you're on, sir.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think, I liked our introducers check to see who brought their AUSA membership card. I was on a panel last year, and there was a sailor on the panel, an admiral. And as soon as our panel was over, he went out and joined. He joined AUSA on the spot. So I'll just put my little pitch in. If a sailor can join AUSA, anybody affiliated with the Army in this room should probably be a member of AUSA. Okay, our purpose today is to review what our Army is doing in the area of accessions. And we're going to cover 3 broad areas. First, enlisted recruiting. Second, assessing our officers, and third, the initial entry training of both officers and enlisted soldiers. Our situation is, in the enlisted recruiting realm, despite enlisting about 70,000 soldiers last year, which was more than we enlisted the year prior, we still missed our target of by about 6,500, and I know you've all seen that in the news. There's a lot of reasons for that make sense. The economy's doing really well. Unemployment is at or near historical lows. That's great for our nation, can make life a little tougher for recruiters. That's probably not a good enough reason, though, for us to hang our hat on. You all have read in the media various percentages being bandied about, but our estimate is somewhere around 30% of our youth are qualified to serve in our armed forces. 70% of the population 17 to 24 unqualified, for mainly three main reasons. The first is a lack of a high school diploma. The second would be obesity, youth obesity, and the third would be misconduct at a level that the armed forces is not willing to give a pass on. That's a strategic issue for the nation. But the truth is, if we recruit successfully from the 30% that's there, that's more than enough to fill the ranks of our armed forces, not just the Army. Of that number there, that 30%, only about 15% of them are propensed to serve. That when asked, would you consider service in the armed forces, they say, no, I'm not really interested in that at all. I wouldn't consider that. And you ask them why. Well, it turns out mostly it's because they don't know what it's about, what it entails. They don't know what the armed forces do. They don't know what the career opportunities are for them, and they don't know what the benefits of service are. So if you give a simple information brief of about 5 minutes long that tells them those kind of three main points about service in the military, propensity jumps to about half of that population that say, oh, okay, well, I would at least now consider it. So that's something we definitely have to get after. It's not all gloomy, for sure. We came pretty close to our objective, and we've got a good plan, which we'll talk about more here, to get to our objective this next year. In the area of retention, that's gone really well. In fact, we're so successful in retention that it helped offset our recruiting shortfall. And so if soldiers are joining the Army, the good news is if they're joining the Army, they're staying in the Army. Our officers' accessions have also been pretty successful. And I want to put to rest a myth here that the Army has to enlist soldiers of lesser quality because we can't attract enough recruits. So that's not the case. In fact, last year, our Army senior leadership increased our quality standards above and beyond what the Department of Defense requires. So that was about 2/3 of the way into the recruiting year when it was already apparent to us that we were probably going to come up short this year. We still made the decision to increase our recruiting standards because we're not willing to sacrifice quality for quantity. We've also toughened and lengthened our initial entry training for both enlisted soldiers and officers. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So as we came up short this year, we did an after-action review because that's what the U.S. Army does. And that review began back in June, even before the end of the recruiting year. And we came up with some pretty good reasons for things that we need to look at. First one is responsibility for accessions was diffused across our Army enterprise. A lot like Modernization Command, where our Army has made a decision to stand up Army Futures Command to bring together modernization efforts under one commander. Similarly, our accessions efforts were diffused across the Army. Another one was that our marketing and advertising efforts had gone astray. They'd kind of gone off the rails, and in fact, the commercials that you're seeing today are a couple of years old. We haven't had a new Army commercial in 2 or 3 years. Our website, goarmy.com, our recruiting website, is about 10 years old. Hasn't been updated significantly in that time frame, and you all know, how fast social media evolves, so it's woefully behind. Our research and analytical capabilities were inadequate, had atrophied. The team, we hadn't filled our team out. And about middle of the year, we were 700 recruiters short. Kind of hard to win a championship game if you're not going to field a full team on the field. Then probably the most significant one was we're using a 1970s approach, an industrial approach, which General Muth can talk to. He can give you the statistics on how many contacts a recruiter has to do to actually get a contracted applicant. And we've relied too long on our traditional strongholds to offset our performance in other areas of the country. So, for example, we've always performed well in the Southeast, the Deep South, and the Midwest. And we've used that performance there to offset our lack of performance in other parts of the country. Well, that's not where the population is growing the most. And there are high-quality recruits in those other parts of the country. So as we go forward, we're going to have to succeed in those areas where we've sort of taken risk with in the past. And I would say that some of this, the reason we kind of waking up to this fact a little too late, is our Army was in decline until late 2016, early 2017. We were on a downward trend, Army in strength. And when you're not having to strive to achieve your goal because you're actually numbers are going down, it doesn't pressurize your recruiting system, it atrophies. And you don't really see that atrophy until you turn the switch back on and start ramping up your recruiting efforts, and then it becomes more obvious. Okay, so we came up with a campaign plan for success, and there are 4 key things that we've done just in the last few weeks. First of all, our Army has brought together the Accessions Enterprise under one commander. That's currently me. The Commanding General of TRADOC has been designated by the Secretary as a senior responsible official in the Army for accessions. So now the Commanding General of TRADOC will have the authority to convene and direct the Army's accessions enterprise. In the past, about the only person that could do that a few weeks ago was the Secretary of the Army. Number 2, we're transforming our marketing and advertising efforts. We're going to fix research with both a national and a regional local focus, zip code level focus. We're going to launch a new advertising campaign that you'll see roll out here in the next week or 2. You'll see new advertisements. We're going to overhaul GoArmy.com and bring it into the 21st century. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to do surge operations in 22 cities that we've identified around the country where we have underperformed in the past. They have significant population growth. They have a good population of high-quality recruits, potential recruits, and we're going to make an effort to be successful in those 22 cities throughout the year. And then, of course, we're going to fill out the recruiting team. Fill out the team so they can win this championship. Our officers of accessions are also going up by a little bit this year, and General Evans can mention that here in his remarks, but I feel confident that we don't have an issue there. And then last, in initial entry training, we've enhanced basic combat training. We've made it tougher. We've increased the standards. General Frost will address that. We've also made officers' basic training tougher. And our advanced individual training is becoming more focused, in fact, almost exclusively focused on large-scale combat operations against a near-peer adversary rather than counterinsurgency type of focus. So with that, I'll pass the mic over to Mr. Williams.
I've been asked to talk about Title 10 and how the MNRA sort of fits into this puzzle of accessions. But first, I'd like to do this. Would everybody raise their right hand? Please, everybody. You've been duly sworn in. You are all responsible for recruiting. One of the biggest changes that we made was that the Secretary of the Army has charged all of us to be responsible for recruiting. No longer are we leaving it to that male or female recruiter to do so. It's all of our responsibilities. Hence, that's why, sort of mission command for accessions has moved to TRADOC. So I'm so happy to be a part of this right here because this panel is part of my battle buddies. They absolutely are. And we are in a battle. We are in a battle for talent. Everybody the folks who sponsored this event all want the same individuals who we're going after. They all do. Therein lies the rub. So how does the MNRA sort of fit into the successions puzzle? You first have to understand that the MNRA, before I start talking about Title 10, what does the MNRA do? The MNRA is responsible for the oversight of the entire personnel enterprise. Now, for me, that means all active duty soldiers, all National Guard soldiers, all reserve soldiers, all DA civilians, and all DA contractors. So the accessions piece for me spans across all of those domains. But obviously, the one that's truly important are the active duty, the reserve component, and the National Guard piece. We're only going to talk about the active component today. Title 10. I feel like I'm talking to the choir when I talk about Title 10 because there's nobody out there, or very few, who don't understand sort of Title 10. Title 10 provides the legal basis for the roles, missions, and organization of the armed forces. It comes down through the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of the Army. It says the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs has the oversight and supervision of the entire personnel enterprise. Now, how do I execute that authority? Easy. It's through the allocation of funds, generally speaking, and personnel. It's also through the development of policies. Those policies with respect to the recruiting piece or the accessions piece has to do with branding, has to do with everything down to the recruiting stations. All of that is sort of something that is very, very important to my office. My job, as it is directed now, is to ensure that TRADOC has all the tools it needs to ensure that our recruiters are successful. Now, as General Townsend just indicated, we didn't always have that right. We are still getting up to speed on making sure we have enough recruiters to do the job. But again, the direction has come down. This is our number one issue for my office, bar none. This is number one, right? The Secretary of the Army will not let me forget that as well. I can talk about a lot of other things. Those are the important pieces right there. This is how we're all tied in. We stay in contact a lot, and we have to. We have to because we have to bring the best talented men and women in America into the world's best army. The folks who do that sit right here. And so I won't go any further. I'll pass this to Major General Muth, but this is the team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So recruiting, it's art and it's a science. So the science. So if we have a mission of, for example, 85,000, we have to talk to 12 million prospects to get 500 to make an appointment, but actually 400,000 actually conduct it, meaning they show up. 250,000 will agree to take a test. 150,000 will pass that test, and then and agree to go to the floor, and then 95,000 will actually go ship, which gives us 85,000. That's science. That's just straight numbers. So when we peeled back the onion after this year, and we did our AAR, we started really looking at the art, because the science is the sheer numbers. Those percentages, that does not change. That is since 1974 doing recruiting, that's what that has told us. But when we went down and we talked to the recruiters, Command Sergeant Major Gavi and I went down and talked to as many recruiters as we can. We closed the door and we said, all right, what's going on? They said, sir, we are spending 2 to 3 hours a day on the phone, and we're calling people cold calls. Who in this room last time when you got a phone, your phone rang and you got a cell number, you didn't recognize it? Did you pick it up? No. And neither do the recruits, neither do the Z generation. I said, okay, so we started getting this trend. Where are they? What are you doing? Well, sir, I actually, on my Twitter account, Twitter, I was doing memes this last year. I recruited 45 recruits for contract. Somebody said they went on Facebook, they did 18. And we didn't really have a full program of that, but our recruiters were doing that. They were thinking outside the box. So we said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to change the art, because the art of it is how you, at the end of the day, reach out to a prospect, get them to make the appointment, get them to conduct and ultimately test and go to the floor. And that's what we had to come out of the industrial age, if I can coin a term that General Townsend said this morning, which I think is perfect, and get it into not just the modern, but the digital age. And that's what we're doing. And we're doing it because the recruiters are the ones that said, sir, we've got to go there, because the Z generation, the millennials, that's where they're operating on. Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, all of it, that's where they are. And by the way, they're being entertained watching what? Not the NFL, not the NBA, esports. So all of those programs, we are currently not just exploring, but every recruiter is now allowed to put those DISA-approved apps to be able to go out and prospect for recruits. And it's making already a huge difference. But we're not stopping there. We're looking at internships because, again, how can we bring in talent and knowledge by, and keep it fresh? Open it up to the interns from Silicon Valley, anywhere. If you want to come work in one of our battalions, looking at social media, helping us with the marketing campaign, or in our brigades, how do we get that in there? Internship program begins this summer. Working with my battle buddy, General Evans, in Cadet Command, marrying up every battalion with the ROTC program to ensure that we're working with them on a daily basis to be able to know that we have students out there that sometimes struggle financially that we can help them with, that can give them further maturity and focus and discipline all through military service. So again, what we're doing in Recruiting Command, think outside the box, try things as quickly as we can. If they don't work, we move on and continue to expand what we are currently doing to reach out to that Z generation, because they are like Moore's Law. Every 18 months, everything doubles in time and space and in the computer world. Well, our Z generation is doing that, because they may be on Twitter today, but they're not going to be on that in 8 months, and we've got to stay ahead of them and make sure that we can, 1, reach out to them, 2, educate them on military service, and then 3, get them to commit to both serving our nation and serving our Army. Command Sergeant Major Gooden.
Sir, thank you. Good afternoon. Test, test, test. We got anything? You good?
You're good.
I got to get on it? Jeez.
You're good.
Okay, I'm good now. So I'm going to talk very briefly about recruiter numbers. As General Townsend mentioned, for this FY, we're approximately short a little right around 700 recruiters to enable us to complete our recruiting mission for the Army. So we've got to come up with a plan. How are we going to get these additional recruiters into our recruiting force so that we can be successful in the next coming FY? And obviously, without having HRC go deep into their pockets and just start identifying staff sergeants and sergeants first class that are out there in the operational force right now and telling a bunch of people that they're going to be not only DA selected to be a recruiter, but we're going to select more of them to be recruiters, just so that we can kind of catch up and make up with the shortage that we have. So internally, what we're looking at is being able to offer up some things for recruiters. So that 700 that we are short is kind of roughly now as that was a little while ago. That's closer to 600 right now, and that 600 really equates to a little over 300 reserve recruiters and 300 active duty recruiters. So some of the things that we can do that we're thinking about doing is, number one, we have our DA selected recruiters who are not 79 Romeos. They're not permanent recruiters, but exactly that. They're DA-selected recruiters. They've been selected by DA to perform their recruiting mission for a short period, short period of time, normally 3 years. So we're going to reach into those folks, and we're going to ask them if they want to stay on for an additional year, those that are successful. And in doing so, we will provide some sort of incentive pay. We haven't quite figured that one out yet, but we will reward them with an incentive pay that kind of pays back for their volunteering to stay on an additional year. And obviously, the numbers that we get from this are not going to completely close the loop on this. The other thing that we're going to do, which is kind of out of the box, which is what General Muth was just describing about, is we're going to look back at former recruiters who were, they're not obviously not 79 Romeos, they're former DA-selected recruiters that are not recruiting anymore. They're no longer doing that, but they're out in the force somewhere. And we're going to ask them, as long as they were successful, we're going to ask them if they want to come back and continue recruiting. And we're going to throw that into their lap and see how that works. So obviously, you know, there's got to be some relevancy that goes along with this. We can't have somebody that's been out of recruiting for so long just jump into it and expect to know exactly what they're doing. So quite honestly, if they've been out of recruiting less than 3 years, we can probably get them to come in if they are volunteering and if they meet the qualifications still. We can get them to come in and go to directly to one of their top 5 company assignments of recruiting that they're choosing to. If they've been out of recruiting for a little over 3 years, anytime over 3 years, then the same stipulations apply, but we're going to add another one. We'll have to have them come back to the Retention and Recruiting College at Fort Knox, where USAREC is headquartered at, and we'll have to have them go through a refresher course before we can send them out to their recruiting companies, where they can pick up with what they used to be doing in recruiting and get after it. The other thing that we're going to do with them is, besides giving them a choice of their top 5 companies that they may choose to serve in as a recruiter, those top 5 locations, is on the return side of this, and this goes for the DA-selected recruiters that are currently in position that are staying a year additional, is that on the flip side of it, HRC will do this, and we'll go ahead and give them one of their top 3 locations of where they want to have a return assignment to when they're done with their recruiting. The third option, which is not our desirable option, which is not what we want to go to, which is why we're going to do put a lot of work towards doing this at all costs, so that we don't have to do this, is to force folks to stay on to recruiting if they're currently there, and then or else to have to dig deeper into the operational force and pull more folks out of that to do recruiting. One of the things that's going to happen probably, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week, is there will be an all-call email, if you call it. It's from the SMA. It's called the SMA Sends email. And basically the message that I just talked to you about with those options is going to go out in an email to the entire force as part of one of the ways to message this, besides through leadership. But this is one of the things that we're looking at doing as far as being able to get our recruiter numbers back up to 100%, so that we can ensure success for the next FY. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, before our next speaker, you've got the 3x5 cards. If you want to fill those out, we'll have people collecting them so we can field questions. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Sergeant Major. John Evans from Cadet Command. And as the guy that's charged by General Townsend with the Army Accessions principal mission for TRADOC, I want to kind of leave you with 3 things, if I could. The first is scope and scale. So as you take a look at how we commission our officers into the Army, we get a handful of officers that are professionals, doctors, dentists, chaplains, that we directly commission into the Army. That's a small number. And then we have 3 principal accession sources, pre-commissioning sources. The first is the United States Military Academy. It will bring in 1,000 lieutenants a year, pretty much, give or take. The second is the Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, also belongs to TRADOC. That's going to be about 1,400 officers this year. ROTC commissioned 5,500 officers this year for the Army in all three components. Over 3,000 of those were commissioned in the active force. So that you can understand the scope of the enterprise, we have 274 host institutions across the United States that service 953 colleges and universities, with over 1,000 cadre assigned to do that mission and about 30,000 cadets. So it's important that you understand, as you look at the officer accession model, we tend to be the big rheostat, because frankly, you can't get inside of West Point's model inside of 5 years, because once a freshman class starts at West Point, that's pretty much what you got. OCS does have the ability to adjust their rheostat a little bit, but they're also constrained by their ability to push up numbers for training. We become the big rheostat for the Army over the course of 2 to 4 years. Right now, we are looking to commission about 5,800 lieutenants next year, with a goal of 6,000 in 2020 as we grow the Army in accordance with what the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army have talked about today. Secondly, I wanted to touch on something Major General Muth said, and that is we are looking at accessions as a holistic enterprise now. Now that the TRADOC commander is the senior responsible officer for accessions, we are trying to break down walls that used to occur between the officer and enlisted side of the accessions model, and make sure that where there's common ground and where we can share, we're doing that, and we're doing that readily. So a person who may come to recruiting command who wants to go on the officer path, recruiting command will turn to ROTC and say, this person is looking for an ROTC scholarship because they're ready for college. Conversely, someone who may believe that they're ready for ROTC and can't fulfill the obligation there, we're going to direct to recruiting command and say, we believe you need some more maturity, we believe you need to establish some financial means, we believe this path will work better for you. So we're working to make sure there's a nexus of those two sources as we are trying to assess the overall Army. And the third thing I want to leave you with is the value of our junior ROTC programs across the nation. Unknown to me before I got to this command, I have purview over the junior ROTC programs in the nation. And so, again, talking about scale and scope, that's over 1,700 programs really across the world, because anywhere where we have a U.S. military high school, we've got a junior ROTC program. 315,000 high school students in that population. So these are young men and women, 20% of which will go on to serve in the military in some capacity. They'll either go to one of our service academies, they will matriculate into the senior ROTC programs, or they will enlist in one of our military services, preferably the Army. But it is a great opportunity for us to build citizens of character. That's what the focus of the program is. It's not a recruiting tool. It's not a recruiting pool necessarily for the Army, although we bring great recruits out of there. We are focused on building citizens of character in junior ROTC so that we can have higher graduation rates and put young men and women of conscience out in our communities where they're going to be productive. And we encourage them at every opportunity to take a look at the Army as their future path forward for that. So I'll pass it over to Major General Frost.
Thanks, John. Test.
Thank you.
All right. So, am I on it? Please, sorry. You're good. So, as a commanding general for Center for Initial Military Training, I'd like to hit the scope and scale aspect as well. The United States Army this past year has trained 125,000 enlisted soldiers, and through basic combat training, advanced individual training, and one station unit training. Basic combat training at 4 locations, advanced individual training of those 150 military occupational skills at 21 locations, then one station unit training at 2 locations. So that is more than all of our sister services combined. So scope and scale, I think, is important as you take what I'm going to say next in context, and I'm going to leave you with 3 major messages as well. But the first is that we increase quality and basic combat training, basic training as of October 1st. The new period of instruction, a new POI has went into place for basic combat training. Why is that? Predominantly, it's for 2 reasons. And the first reason is the first unit of assignment for the last 4 years running has told us in a degrading fashion percentage-wise that they are increasingly getting less disciplined and less trained soldiers into the force. The second reason is the Army has changed its focus. We've changed, while we maintain our focus on counterinsurgency, we're also moving towards high-intensity combat and hybrid operations, so to speak, as you heard from the Secretary and the Chief of Staff in the Army. So we had to change the focus of basic combat training and make it more rigorous and more foundational. And so what are we doing within basic combat training to increase that quality? Well, we're increasing weapons proficiency, the shoot, move, communicate, treat aspects, so communications proficiency, again, weapons proficiency, medical training. We've increased the discipline. We have increased soldier acculturation and standardized the training across the 4 basic combat training installations, which was not done before. We've increased grit and resilience through robust field training exercises, the hammer, the anvil, and the forge. Again, all that went into effect on 1 October. Fort Jackson for the last 9 months piloted this, and it went into effect again on 1 October. And so I wanted you to understand that we're increasing the quality and why we're trying to increase the quality. Now, you may say with what you just heard that increasing quality, the quality of the soldiers and increasing the standard might mean we're going to attrit more soldiers. Well, I want to talk about attrition, what attrition is and what it really means. So we measure attrition from the MEP station, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station, all the way through the first 3 years of first unit of assignment. And what we've had here in the last couple of years is we've had about a 35% of the United States of our soldiers, enlisted soldiers, attrit before the end of their third year at their first unit of assignment. And so, and you add to that the 15% non-deployable rate that we had, and so the decrease in readiness across our units due to the lack of personnel that were trained and were available for all sorts of reasons, many of them medical and musculoskeletal, et cetera. They were just too high non-deployables. And so, as you look at that, it's easy to say, with the pressures to increase the number of recruits and to maintain more soldiers in the Army through basic training well, maybe we should reduce the quality or reduce the standards. But the problem is that's short-sighted. Because if I'm in basic training and I graduate 100, I have 100 soldiers, and I graduate 90 and send them on to AIT or the first unit of assignment, and General Evans has, only graduates 80. But at the end of the first 3 years of first unit of assignment, if he's got 70 left and I've only got 60, who actually did the job better by pushing quality through and decreasing long-term attrition? And so it's very easy to get short-sighted and say, let's reduce standards. We're going to push more people through because, maybe they'll make it in the Army. That's not the case. We have to increase the quality. And that's the quality versus quantity argument you've heard the Army senior leadership talk about, and I think why it's so vital, because you have to look strategically and understand that 3 years down the road, we want a more lethal, more trained soldier for that new environment that we're predicting is going to be out there in 2028, hence the changes to basic combat training and also the changes you're seeing in AIT. So that's how quality and attrition are linked, and I think it's important to understand that. And then the last piece that we're doing is physical fitness, and just as part of the holistic health and fitness system, and that is the introduction of the Army Combat Fitness Test and the Occupational Physical Assessment Test. Previously, about 18 months ago, before OPAT, the physical test to get into the United States Army was the strength that it took to open the door to the recruiting center. No longer the case. Now you have to pass 4 events in order, and then that you get rated on how you perform on those 4 events as to whether or not you can be in a moderate, significant, or heavy demands military occupational skill, and we have a better physically fit recruit that's coming in because of that, and that's on the path towards the Army Combat Fitness Test, again, to get after the challenges that we have seen with high rates of musculoskeletal injuries, lower back, shoulders, lower body, legs, and to decrease the medical issues and get a better physically fit soldier that is fit in the physical components necessary for combat. And that's the study that's been done for the last 5-6 years and why we're moving to the Army Combat Fitness Test. So those 3 things I'd like to leave you with. Again, quality, why we're increasing quality in basic training, how attrition is actually linked to that in the long term, so we're not short-sighted, and then how physical fitness, how important that is as a cornerstone to combat readiness, and the physical fitness tests that we have that are going to help us achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over to question and answers, and again, remind anybody if you've got a card, hold them up so they can collect them and bring them up here, and we'll review them. But I'll start out with an initial question here, and we have down here, please. And this is primarily for Major General Muth, but others may want to answer it. Are you leveraging outside assets like populations, retirement groups, organizations of Recruiting Command to help you help the recruiting mission?
Well, yes, actually, so tomorrow I have a meeting with CASA. Anyway, yes, to answer the question. So where do you start? Because there's a ton of out there. So Boys and Girls Clubs of America, they've already approached us. Spartan racing teams, they've approached us. Veterans groups have approached us. As a matter of fact, we have a system through Go Army where veterans can register and be part of the recruiting force. With the CASAs, every community we go to, we try to reach out to everybody or anybody that will. One, they want to take the time and listen to our message, and then two, how do they get that message out? And really, we've got a 3x5 card. If you want one after this, Sergeant Major's got them right now. And in a very short way, it talks about one, tell your Army story, because if you have been involved in the military of any way, shape, or form in the past, you have a story to tell. And then after that story is, how did that impact you? And what did it do for you in your life? Because I know personally, it put me on a path that I was not on. And anybody that knows me at 16, they'll be able to tell you that's absolutely the truth. And it's helped me in so many ways. But you've got to tell that story, and that's our message to all the groups out there that want to help us. And then after that, we get them to get in touch with our recruiters. So we're starting that campaign now. And we know that it can help us into this next year's mission.
Mr. Williams, how will the Army adjust its marketing advertising efforts to align with the Army's focus to prepare for the high-intensity conflict?
Wow. Very big question. And that's still being worked, quite frankly. Let me give you a few things that's going on right now. We have something called the Marketing Enhancement Brigade, whose commander is actually right here, who does fantastic things for our Army. I mean, absolutely fantastic things. But they weren't aligned properly. And so one of the things that Jess did was align this Marketing Enhancement Brigade under TRADOC. So one of the beauties of having a 4-star is that you can now start doing things now. So we're in the process, quite frankly, of just putting all the right pieces together where they belong, right? Fortunately, the Marketing Enhancement Brigade is at Fort Knox, but it's now structured under TRADOC for that alignment. There are a number of other things that's going on as well, right? The brand. So we're doing a lot of things and sort of to try to figure out what's our next brand, what is going to be the next Army motto, if you will. But that's one of the things. That's a big thing. That's what I just told you is not insignificant at all. It's huge. It's huge because it can pay dividends sort of right now.
Thank you. And I'll open this up probably to Major General Muth, but others may answer. Since you have deputized us all as recruiters, can you equip us with the tools, questions, answers, apps, short forms to execute?
Yes. Again, that goes with, really, though, we don't want to over-inundate you too much. What we want to do is, again, empower you to tell your story, empower you to be able to, at a time where you have the opportunity to talk to the youth of today, the 17 to 20, the Z gens out there, again, relaying, if you are a veteran, if you are an influencer of what the military can offer, what military service, and more specifically the Army. And then after that, what we have to do is provide you as we update GoArmy.com, because that is truly the best way for us, if you don't have a specific local recruiter to get a hold of, for anybody that's interested to go right on, and that will take you to a site that allows for us to get in contact with the prospect or the prospectus or the potential future soldier.
You know, sir, I don't.
Go ahead.
I'd like to. You know, there's also, every community in America has an Army presence, and so there are soldiers that are there that you can connect to, or those that are connected to it. You have Association of the United States Army chapters, right? You have civilian aides to the Secretary of the Army. You have reserve ambassadors. You have ROTC detachments. You have recruiters. So there are a lot of folks that you can connect into to understand what's going on in the Army if you want to be connected to the Army in your community and then tell your story and, and be connected to them. So I would say it's, and they're out there trying to seek you out if you want to help. And so you seek them out as well, and I think there'll be a good synergy that happens. But there's more of us out there than you think. It's just a matter of connecting in.
Okay. Mr. Williams and maybe Major General Muth, are there plans to augment or replace use of the ASVAB as the qualifying tools for recruits?
There is actually a scientific study afoot that has actually looked at the ASVAB, and what we've done is also set up a new one as well. The study that had been completed literally came back and said the ASVAB was really, really good. Really, really good. All right, so I have another study that I've instituted to take another look at it. And I can go down to all the reasons why it said it was, but because we thought the same thing, quite frankly. And the great thing of looking at recruiting right now and having the emphasis that it has is that we're looking at everything. There is no stone that will be not be unturned. So we're going to we've taken a look at it, and right now we're going to keep it because we haven't found anything better.
I'd like to add to that. That's excellent. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And he's right about the HAZVAB actually is proven to be pretty durable. So maybe not spend so much time on looking at that, but what we have done is we've added this physical test, the OPAT, and what we're looking at doing is adding a third test. Actually, we're already issuing this third test. We're just not doing a lot with it right now. It's a non-cognitive test. So the idea would be we would test the intelligence of the soldier or the recruit applicant. We test their physical potential because it doesn't really test their physical performance, but as much as their potential. Then their non-cognitive, sort of emotional intelligence, their predisposition, their determination, that kind of thing. So those, sort of like our special operations community does with SOF applicants, we would do that for all soldiers to better fit them into the career fields that they're better suited for. We're doing that with the physical assessment, the OPAT, and in its first now going on 2 years, approaching 2 years of being in the field, we're attributing about a 1% decline in attrition due to physical reasons. And the thing that's kind of remarkable about that, 1% doesn't sound like that big of a deal. That's $30 to $40 million of the taxpayers' money, that 1% decline. So the OPAT will probably see a little bit of tweaking as we field this new PT test that General Frost talked about. And we're also looking at this non-cognitive test to add that as well.
General Evans and General Muth, how do you recruit young cyber studs who may not be aligned to all Army standards or culture?
Did the question actually say cyber studs? Is that what that says?
That says cyber studs. So,
And studettes.
and studettes.
I'll jump on that a little bit. So I think there tends to be this belief that just because you have some adeptness with a computer that you can't be in good physical shape or you can't conform to some type of norm that would make you a good potential soldier. I think that's false, frankly. What you find is you've got a lot of talented young men and women out there, particularly in our colleges and universities that are in our ROTC programs. Cyber is one of the it's our newest branch, but it's one of the branches that is being exceptionally selective on branching for the officer corps. So for every officer that wants to branch cyber, they have to do an interview with the cyber branch and be accepted. The cyber branch and EOD are the only two branches that do that outside of SOF, which you don't assess directly into. So they're being very discriminating about that. So they have an opportunity to look across not just what someone's mental faculties are and their ability to operate in that space, but also do they meet all the other attributes that are required of the officer corps. And I'll kick it to Frank for.
I'll just say, our profession is based on standards and discipline, and that's just the rock bottom of it's the foundation of what our profession's about. Now, there are a lot of folks out there that have a tremendous amount of talent, and what we're finding is in the Z generation, they do want to become part of something bigger than themselves. They want to serve. They want to give back. And they've got this talent out there, and they understand when they join up, if they're going to be part of this, they have to adhere to those standards and discipline that, again, is what our profession starts with. And we are finding where they are, and a lot of them are. That's why one of our path forwards for kind of changing the art of the recruiting is we are standing up two e-gaming teams, an esports team and an e-maneuver team that's going to fall into the marketing engagement brigade there at Fort Knox, and they're already members of them are already competing. And what we're finding is we were part of an event, and we almost reached I think it ended up being 2.2 million Z-Gens that were watching one of our guys play. And so we know they're out there. We know they want to participate. But again, the foundation for our profession is standards and discipline, and that's not really going to change.
And sir, if I may add one thing to this. So this is why we've changed basic combat training. And you may say, how does that fit in? Because what we found out is we had watered down things too much, and soldiers looked at themselves as infantrymen or artillery or a logistician or cyber. You're a soldier first. And so acculturation of what it means to be a soldier, understanding our history, the values, the creed, and then going through in a common bond that results in the forge at the end where they come out and they're soldiers first and earn the right to put the patch on that says U.S. Army, to put their beret on, to get their National Defense Service Medal and their Soldier for Life certificate before they achieve their military occupational skill is the most important thing. That is foundational. Then you can become a cyber soldier or an infantry soldier. But soldier first, and that core of who you are is what we have really tried to embed back into basic combat training. So I wanted to add that into that and emphasize what the two gentlemen to my left said. Thank you.
Thank you. And, sir, officer training. Any consideration on limiting the KD requirements for officers to transfer to functional areas? Example, engineer officer can carry any leave for public affairs if KD complete. Most all units will. Not give some our command if they talk about leaving, and command is their only KD completion option.
Okay, not really the focus of this panel, but I will address that. So there are some branches so a few years ago we had requirements. Basically, you couldn't go to another, if you were interested in something other than your basic branch, you couldn't go until you had completed certain steps in your officer's career. And in many cases, it was company command. Civil affairs used to be an example like that. And some years ago, about 10 or so, maybe a little more now, the civil affairs branch said, we will take officers who have not completed company command, and that actually got them, after their lieutenancy was completed, allowed them to start shifting into this function area where they really wanted to be. So we need to look at that. That was about engineers and public affairs. We'll take that one on. If you're the engineer out there that wants to be a public affairs officer, we'll take that one on. But let's turn it back to sessions now.
Anyone on the panel, but what actions are underway to use social media and big data analytics to help recruit the force?
So I will tell you, so let me go back to that model. First of all, it's very early in us making this shift. And so we're thinking we'll probably get some of the data back, probably second quarter. We're going to start seeing the differences in the numbers. So it starts with really talking to that recruiter going, okay, again, first of all, when you talk to a recruiter, one of the first things they're going to tell you, sir, I put in 45 last year. Actually, I met a couple that put in 80. They are just working 7 days a week to do that, by the way. It takes a lot. So that's the first analytics, is that you're meeting and we're gathering some of the data, and where are we getting that from? Is that Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? So that's one. The second one, the one that we really are just breaking into right now is, and if I can just for a second, we had a Sergeant First Class Jones out of the Baton Rouge Battalion that's very well known in the Ultimate Fighter e-gaming world, and he was asked to just be an MC for one of the big tournaments in LA. So we created a hashtag, which was hashtag Army Esports, that you could go on before he even went live and go see him particularly. 32,000 signed up in advance. It went live 1 minute later, 1.1 million were watching him. and he was a recruiter in uniform. He was talking about cyber and all the different 150 MOSs we have. And then after that, we had recruiters standing by, and he said that. So, and then after a day, 2.2 million watched it because a lot of folks go back and rewatch that. That's you're right. We need to get those analytics. We just don't have them yet because we have to do more of the e-gaming to start pulling that in. And then we have to capitalize on when these guys go live, we have a place for them to go to immediately get a hold of a recruiter. So more to follow because this is brand new. No other service is doing this, and I didn't really want to even talk about it because I hope the Navy or the Air Force will steal it from us. Ask me that question next year at this time if actually I'm still in the job. All right, thanks.
Hey, Pete, can I jump on that too a little bit? So we're looking at the same thing. So Major General Muth and I talk about this all the time. We live 4 houses down from each other, and we share our Bourbon Trail experiences on Friday nights and talk about how we're going to get after this. But we have not been good in the social space as an Army. We think we've been good. I'd like to say that the Army does 2 things with consistency in my mind. We don't see ourselves very well, and we talk to ourselves about ourselves a lot. So we got to get better about doing things differently in that regard. One of the things we're doing in ROTC, very simple, is in the summers, when I bring cadets to train, cadet summer training, 10,000 cadets in 100 days train at Fort Knox. We bring journalism majors from across the country, and they come out as interns, and they do PAO work for us. They come out, and they love it. I mean, some of them are cadets, and they'll go on to go into summer camp later, but some of them will come out there, and they'll just do intern work for us as PAOs. I've told my team this year what I want to do is I want to create another group of interns that are marketing majors, and I want to bring cadets that are in, and instead of going to perhaps a cadet troop leadership training opportunity, they would come in and be part of a cell for 2 to 3 weeks and talk to us about how we should market to them. Because unfortunately what we find is we tend to be a little out of step with what they're doing because they're just so agile in this social space that it's hard to keep up. I mean, I just got my own Twitter feed, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm trying to keep up in this space, but I can't keep up with what they're doing, and we need people that can do that. We need them to inform us on how better to do it.
General Frost, will the Army Combat Fitness Test have alternative test events?
No, thanks for that question. So that's something during the field test. So right now, on October 1st, the field test for the Army Combat Fitness Test of 60 battalions of every type across all compos and every type of unit has started on October 1st. And for the next year, those 60 units will take 2 tests, will train for it. We have mobile training teams going out to train those units, and we're also setting up training at Fort Jackson, Fort Eustis for the rest of the Army that wants to get graders, trainers, and train the trainers trained on the Army Combat Fitness Test. So this next year, to get at specifically at your question, we're studying many things with the field test before we go to full implementation on 1 October 19 across the entire Army. One of those aspects being studied is what, if any, alternate events there will be, and if so, for which aspects or components of fitness or events will there be an alternate event. So we don't know the answer yet. We're looking at it. It's going to be studied, but I do know this. Is if there is going to be alternate events or when an alternate event is decided upon by the leadership of the Army after the data is in, rest assured that that alternate event is going to be just as hard, if not harder, than the actual event. In fact, if I had my way, I would incentivize the alternate event to be so hard that you would be incentivized to want to take the regular test. And to quote somebody that's up on this panel, we kind of don't want any more mall walkers, people that can just can kind of get through the test without doing the rigor that's necessary for that component of fitness that we know scientifically is necessary for you to succeed as a soldier in your occupation, which is combat. And so that's a little bit of a long answer, but we're studying it over the next year. But there's going to be some rigor, and the alternate events are going to be difficult, and they're going to test that aspect of fitness as much as the normal Army Combat Fitness Test event will.
Our Army today has tens of thousands of soldiers that can't take the regular PT test. I think there's something basically not right about that. And our Secretary of the Army has said that if you can't pass the PT test, maybe you shouldn't be serving in the Army. So I think we're going to look really hard at alternate events. And I'm sure someone's having fun out there. Sounds like he's riding an equipment cart or something. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be alternate events because there are soldiers who are injured for a good reason and are unable maybe to take the test for a certain period of time. What we want to work to reduce in the future are soldiers who essentially are on a permanent alternate PT test.
Right.
That's not where we want to go.
And with the fitness test, this is, while it's about now, it's actually about the future. And you have to imagine the soldiers coming in today that are taking the OPAT and will know nothing but the Army Combat Fitness Test and how to holistically train all physical components of fitness. And they will be used to it. And so you will reduce those numbers of those permanent profiles, the folks like today that can't take certain aspects of the test because we didn't physically train properly for the rigors of combat. And so you have to think about this test through the lens of 10 or 20 years from now, not through the lens of making accommodations through alternate events for everyone today, because if you do, you will water down the standards and you won't have standards. And so I think that's an important balance as we move forward.
You heard the Chief of Staff of the Army at lunch. He talked about the new PT test, and he said it's age and gender neutral because combat is age and gender neutral. So I think we're going down the right path. Our Army has applied a lot of science and research to the development of this test. The events were very carefully chosen. When I arrived at TRADOC about 7 months ago, I was skeptical of some of the events myself, and the team that developed the test won me over. And I think that we're in a good place, and I think that what General Frost said is, as our Army trains and prepares for this test, we will get fitter and in a more holistic way. Our current PT test actually does, it's a good measure of general fitness. It is not a good measure of combat fitness, and we have known that for a decade and a half. And this new PT test will have about an 80% correlation to combat fitness, and our soldiers will be healthier, stronger, and healthier for training for this new PT test.
General Muth, recruiting brigade commanders have told me that a number of potential recruits fail to enlist or ship to MEPS due to parents influencing them not to enlist. How are we targeting the parents as a center of influence?
So, great question again. So, even though we are still, we are looking at a new way to get after the Z-Geners 17 and 24, the influencers are still, they are watching NFL, and they are on different means, and they are on the phone. So they do pick up the phone. So what we have to do, again, it's through education. And what we do a lot of times, and it's very basic, because remember, on the art side, it ultimately comes down to somebody sitting across from a potential soldier and saying, okay, come join the Army, or will you join the Army? And one of the techniques we use is called a hot knock. And so when we feel, usually a recruiter or a recruit will get an idea that somebody's they're getting some potential influence from an influencer about not joining. So we'll go do a hot knock at the house. And matter of fact, Command Sergeant Major Gavia just did a couple of those 2 weeks ago in Nashville. And they go, and what they're really trying to do, they're not really trying to talk to the potential future soldier. They're trying to talk to the influencer. And once you sit down with them and you have a discussion with them and you talk about what the Army did, at least part of being a recruiter, you have to you're bringing them or telling them your Army story, and you tell them what the Army can do, and in terms of whether it's the discipline, it's the focus, it's the maturity, but then there's the piece about college and everything the Army has to offer. That's how we do it. So what you have to do is through make sure you maintain the contact of where they are, and we know where they are. And then you have to educate and you have to reach out. And again, a lot of them aren't answering the phone, so we have to find them. And a lot of times it means you go to their house and you talk to them one-on-one.
Major General Evans, I've observed the Navy JROTC has been aggressive in sponsoring orienteering and cybersecurity teams. Will we see this more in the Army JROTC, and will we see the Army sponsoring high school robotics team and competitions to engage our youth and to inspire a new generation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we already do some of those things with our Raider Challenge competition, the orienteering and the tactical type work, building rope bridges, that kind of thing, what we call high adventure training. We do that. It's very competitive. Our junior ROTC programs get very engaged with that. But in that other space, We are already partnering. We've got a pilot program right now with Vex Robotics, and one of my brigades is pushing out, partner with Vex Robotics to send robotics kits to schools where they learn with a faculty mentor, usually, how to build robots and how to use some of their skill sets that they already have, as some of these young men and women are really smart on the tech piece. And then they go and they compete in the robotics competitions that occur all across the country. And we're seeing a great response and return on that investment. So we're doing lots of things like that, very similar to what Navy ROTC is doing. We're just doing it at many more different places.
General Frost, how has officer initial training gotten tougher, per General Townsend's remarks, and what changes might we see in the future as the length in POI?
And was that officers?
Officer training, sorry, sir.
Yeah, so, and I know General Townsend may want to jump in on this. So General Townsend kind of made it pretty clear. We came in and we looked at basic training and advanced individual training, and bottom line is an enlisted soldier that shows up at first unit of assignment after having gone through basic combat training or one station unit training and AIT, all of the training that soldier receives across all of the basic skills, shoot, move, communicate, treat skills, survive, protect, all of that, physical fitness, whatever training that soldier receives, Private Frost receives. When Private Frost reports and Lieutenant Frost reports on the same day after having gone through Basic Officer Leader Course A, Alpha, the pre-commissioning, and then plus B, the post-commissioning basic course, Lieutenant Frost should have done equal to or greater than all of those basic foundational skills that Private Frost went through, so that he or she can look at Private Frost and say, I can lead you because I've done everything that you have done, and plus more with the officer professional development that occurs in BOLIC A and BOLIC B. And so right now, and again, this is kind of in the realm of General Evans, so those pre-commissioning sources are reviewing their POI, and then all of the centers of excellence are reviewing theirs. We're adding those two to ensure that equation is greater than or equal to the changes that we're making in basic combat training and advanced individual training, so that our officers do at least as much, if not more, than the enlisted soldiers.
I think you covered it well. We have 3 general commissioning sources, 4 if you count direct commissioning, but that's a very small niche population. Officers Candidate School is not an issue here because all of those officers have to go to basic training first. West Point's cadet summer training is pretty robust. There's only a couple of tasks they have to add where they will have accomplished everything that a soldier does, plus the officer stuff that they will do over 4 years. In ROTC, we have a very diverse group of what you heard General Evans talk about 200 host programs, 900 places we're doing ROTC across the land. So some of them have access to resources and facilities and ranges and training areas, and some of them don't. So it's really hard to get at it in ROTC, where 70% of our officer corps comes from. So we actually have to do most of that in the summertime in a fairly compressed environment. Cadet Command is moving out on that, and just like General Frost says, the end state is that every officer will have done everything a private soldier did to earn a right to be called a soldier, plus their officer training.
Sergeant Major, if former recruiters come back to USAREC, how long is the tour? Are they automatically converted to 79 RUMOs? And is there any talk to bring back SDAP for station commanders?
3-part question. So I will take the first one. If they come back, how long are they going to come back for? And that would be for 3 years. The next part of that, I'll go to the SDAP because...
Are they automatically convert to 79 Romeos?
No, they're not automatically converted to 79 Romeos. They still have to prove their assault as a field recruiter, as a Department of Army selected recruiter, and if they make it, then they'll be offered the opportunity to convert to 79 Romeo.
If they want to.
If they want to,
not be forced
right. And then the second one is...
The SDAP for station commanders.
SDAP for station commanders, yes, they're going to get it. We have a SDAP piece that we're relooking right now As of currently, right now, they're not getting it, but we're going to look at making sure that that comes back in. I don't think that's going to be an issue, but station commanders are, yes, going to be having SDAP.
SDAP is special duty pay, in case you're not wondering what that is. So there were some reductions made with special duty pay. It was a decision made some time ago. It's just now coming into effect. It seems like really horrible timing, actually. So we're going to relook that really fast. But it seems, it's like don't field the full team, but win the championship. Well, go win this championship, but I'm taking some of your money away. So it's really horrible timing. We're going to relook that whole thing.
General Townsend, how does historical efforts play a role in new efforts, particularly the lessons of post-Vietnam Army and the move to all-volunteer force?
Okay, so this whole review, I told you in my opening remarks that, we did this after-action review to study, okay, what happened this year and what do we need to do for the future? The Army has missed its recruiting objective before in years past. And the Army recovers and keeps rolling along. And I think we will again this year. But we did our after-action review, and we looked at past history, and we actually had a group of young officers who were in a fellowship do a pretty detailed study of our history. I can kind of sum it up by a conversation I had with General Rick Shinseki, retired now, former Chief of Staff of the Army a few years ago. In the late 90s, early part of this last decade. He basically told me that they missed mission when he was the Vice Chief and Chief of Staff. And he told me, he actually put into context why this happened. I mentioned it briefly in my opening remarks, that we were in the drawdown of the end of the Cold War, the end of the Gulf War. You will remember this term, the peace dividend, and we're going to save the American taxpayers' money because we're not going to have to fight anymore against the Soviet Union and Europe, etc. So we're drawing down, and what happens is you start drawing down. Well, one of the first things you do is you start dialing back your recruiting apparatus because you no longer need to recruit as many people a year in an Army that's in drawdown. Well, by the time someone decides to turn that around and send you back upward, 9/11 happened. Next thing you know, we're in a bad way, and our recruiting apparatus has atrophied, and we just didn't realize it because we weren't putting it to the test every year like we are, like we should be. So the similar kind of thing has happened here. We've been in a drawdown situation since about 2012-13, drawing down as we were withdrawing from our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and our recruiting apparatus was being degraded and atrophying without really us noticing it, and it wasn't hurting anything anyway. And now we just, in the last 18 months or so, we've turned that around. We've put a heavy demand back on our recruiting apparatus, and it just wasn't up to the task. So a review of history has played an important role in this.
General Evans, can you talk a bit about opportunities to enhance diversity across ROTC cohorts, particularly your Congressional Scholarship Initiative?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Pete. What we find is that we leave a little bit of talent on the cutting room floor with regards to West Point applicants. So the United States Military Academy will seat about 1,000 freshmen every year, but they'll get 12,000 fully qualified candidates to fill those seats. So there's 11,000 college-age students out there that are kind of left out. What we do with the Congressional Scholarship Initiative is we get the names of those candidates that are not selected to attend the Military Academy, and we provide those to the congressional districts, congressmen in the districts, and we tell them, hey, if you'd like to go out there and contact these people in your districts, we can offer ROTC scholarships to them. And you can kind of be our messenger, if you will. It's a good news story for them. It allows them to be able to connect with their constituency, and it brings a quality candidate to us. We're focusing on diversity candidates particularly because right now, frankly, we're struggling a little bit with getting the right amount of diversity in the force. And we're trying lots of new ways to try to enrich that, particularly in our combat arms. But it's a great initiative, and we've had good success with it. Last year was the first year. We're rolling into the second year, and we're going to continue to put some effort into that.
General Faust, Has OPAT lower injuries at basic training by better alignment of physical status to MOS? If yes, then what funds were saved?
Yeah, well, General Townsend talked about this a little bit. So I will tell you that it's very difficult to say as you go through 10 weeks or plus another, let's say, 15 weeks of AIT and say, you know what, that was the one thing that we are sure prevented all injuries, right? That's an impossible correlation to make. However, we can generalize, and there is some, and look at it and know that there are probably some positives coming out of this. So I would say yes. Again, we have attrited about 2,000 or a couple thousand less, about 1%, as General Townsend said, have attrited for, and our musculoskeletal injury rates have decreased. The medical challenges from a physical aspect have decreased. We do attribute a good portion of that to the occupational physical assessment test, but we can't directly correlate scientifically that it was the OPAT. But we are still studying it, and we're doing a longitudinal study for those personnel that have gone through the OPAT all the way through first unit of assignment. So it's going to take us a few years to really get a good look at this and understand exactly the exact benefits that we've had. But so far the indicators are, again, about 30 to 40 million saved, about 1%. We think a large portion of that is attributable to the occupational physical assessment test. And it's not just the OPAT itself. The OPAT, and I don't want to say it's just the OPAT, because the OPAT, and I'm going to throw this to General Muth, or at least give his team credit, those 1,600-ish recruiting centers out there, those recruiters who administer the occupational physical assessment test to those potential recruits, they're actually putting those, there's actually physical training that's going on so that those recruits can qualify, get physically fit to pass that OPAT. And those recruiters are out there helping those young Americans who want to be soldiers be able to pass that test. And then we do think that we've done a pretty good job of gradiating by moderate, significant, and heavy demands, the military occupational skills, and categorizing those using that test as a potential for your ability to do that occupational skill. But again, we continue to study, and we'll refine that as we look at it over time.
Mr. Williams, has the Army collected and analyzed data on why a given recruits a trip more often than others? And there's a box that says USMC model, which I'm not familiar with.
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Has the Army collected and analyzed data on why given recruits a trip more often than others?
Why given recruiter attrits more often?
The recruiters recruits.
The recruiters recruit. So you have a recruiter that recruits a...
You get 10, and they all make it through. I get 10, and only 5 of mine make it through.
And I guess the Marines have a model that does that. So I'm
I'm
making
not
an
familiar
assessment.
with the Marine Corps model on that, and that's something I got to get back to you on, because I'm sure that the Secretary will certainly ask that question if it's been asked.
That came up in our research, and I'll maybe a couple guys here on the panel can talk about it. But what came up in our research and our campaign plan was connecting the recruiter through to the recruit all the way through graduation for initial entry training, so or at least basic training. So a Marine recruiter doesn't get credit for his recruit until they graduate. He doesn't get credit for putting them in. He gets credit when they graduate. And if they graduate with honors, they'll bring the recruiter in, and he'll stand there with his drill sergeant and the recruit who's the honor graduate of basic training, and the recruiter and the drill sergeant who trained him will get share in the credit for that.
Now that's interesting. I'd be interested in what you feel
The
about
scale
that.
of that would challenge the Army. The scale of it would challenge the Army.
And that's another thing that, when we start looking at the other services, sometimes we just forget how big the United States Army is. Right? And the costs associated with those kinds of things. I don't.
Has anybody got,
Sir,
will you go say something else?
Well, what I would tell you is that we do have data on why trainees attrit in initial entry training. And so what we've done is we've tried to really refine and understand why. So we've updated the codes. I won't get into the specific acronym that helps us, but we're trying to better understand why soldiers are attriting in the initial entry training, or basic combat training. And 41% of them are for medical issues that existed prior to service. And so there is a gate in MEPS and a gate in the medical side, that we've got to kind of close and better understand. 34% are failure to adapt, and 13% are for kind of another reason. And so there are some reasons why as we look at it, there is some room for us to improve. And there are all sorts of reasons why you may not find something that existed prior to service. It's not that it's a recruiter's fault. There are things that sometimes we just medically didn't catch, or that the recruit didn't even know about, or didn't even come out until the stress or rigors of IET happened. And so I think as we better understand and study this, we'll be able to affect to the left of the boom, so to speak, and prevent that attrition from coming in the first place. Just like we don't want first unit of assignment to attrit. We want to push less from AIT to first unit, less from basic to AIT, less from MEPS to basic, and less from recruiters to MEPS. And so that's the analysis we're trying to really get down and refine so that we can get after, I think, what the basis of the question was.
Okay. General Muth, have we done the analysis to shift recruiters from smaller stations, less populated areas to larger cities, 22 cities? That might have a meaning. I'm not sure what it is. Right. What is the plan to surge capability to the large populated cities?
That's a fantastic question. So to answer it in a simple way, yes, we have. So we, first of all, we needed money to do a lot of both renovations, upgrades, move some stations, close some stations because the populations just weren't there at all. And some of the investment this year, I think we were up to like $38 million in terms of total investment because we absolutely did that. We have 1,400 recruiting stations, so we needed to do something with about 50%, almost 700. We got after about 276 this year. And, we went out, and sure enough, that again, you get the greatest amount of information from the recruiters on the ground. But you go visit the recruiter station that is sitting in the mall, that they are the only store left in the mall, and they're trying to recruit. Or it's above a liquor store downtown in some city, or, just name it. It's out there, and it's like, okay, we've got to move them. And we got to move them to not just where the population is, it's the propense population. And the other thing that we found interesting, it's not just to where the population is, but where is the youth population moving? Because what we found is putting it right down in the downtown city is not necessarily the best place, but where are the schools? Because as you get the traffic going by, that's where you get the potential walk-ins, and you can start to influence the neighborhood and things like that. So yes, we are doing that. Yes, we are moving them. And what was the other? There was one more part of the question. Oh, the surge force. So here, again, not my idea. This guy named Carter Price, who runs the recruiting college, phenomenal commander. He says, sir, we have this force that goes through a training program, and we have 32 classes a year. And it's usually about 80 students that are either going to become recruiters or recruiting commanders, station commanders. And so that the course is 6 weeks long. So, and some of our focus cities, while we go in there on a deliberate type of event, we have the ability to take 80 brand new recruiters that have just gone through in what we call the live fire. And they spend 2 to 3 to 4 days in that location, and they're spreading out amongst the high schools, the colleges, the junior colleges, at the event itself, or just downtown. And that surge force we've just done it now 3 times between Nashville, Louisville, and Pittsburgh. And one, it's incredible training for these brand new recruiters because they're actually getting out there and using the skills we just taught them. But 2, we have the ability, our first data collection is in Pittsburgh. They were able to get contact information that a recruiting station would take a month to gather, and they got it in basically 2 days. So that is the kind of reinforcing, kind of the element on the ground and taking that opportunity with one big event with a surge force to kind of, exceed what the normal organization on the ground would be able to accomplish. I'm
going to use my authority as the head of the panel here to give you back about 30 minutes of your life back. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 more questions. Y'all have been great. We've got a lot of good questions here. We'll take 2 more that Pete has teed up here, and then we'll adjourn for the day. And if you want to stick around, and there's someone who had a question about AFPAC hands, if that person is still here, I will meet with you afterwards here, if you one-on-one, if you want to talk about that. Okay, so I just would add that to what General Muth was saying, that we have been able, this industrial model that we've had has allowed us to accomplish our mission with just kind of brute force and mass and kind of not really refined. And we've been able to get it done. And what we actually want to do is increase our agility and precision in how we're doing and bring it to a modern operation here. So getting GoArmy.com into the modern world. It's 10 years old. Getting this research and analytical capability that we talked about, so we can target and not so a recruiter doesn't have to talk. Our recruiters don't have to talk to 12 million people to put 85,000 into the Army. I think we should be able to spend our time really having a better conversation with a lot fewer of those people. So that's the model we're shifting to. Here we are, we have a demand placed on us to make mission this year, pretty significant one, and it's we still have the industrial model. So we're going to still do some brute force kind of stuff with mass numbers, but like General Muth was explaining there, we've just really are just sort of tightening the rigging a little bit and just synchronizing ourselves a little bit better, and it's already paying off, just the little efforts we've done over the last few weeks. So, okay, let's go to the last couple questions.
That was pretty good closure, sir. Is there a plan to increase General Frost, is there a plan to increase initial training for all soldiers regardless of MOS, not just combat arms? If not, why? When are we in the business of making all soldiers more lethal?
Right now, there is no plans to extend basic combat training to 10-week basic combat training. So what we've done is try to increase the quality and the rigor by reviewing and revamping the entire POI, because what we found is that there were a lot of tasks that were not necessary, that were outdated, a lot of things had crept in that were not necessary, and we did not have the rigor or repetition in the right focused combat-related tasks, nor did we have the field training, the field training that was necessary, and the aspects that test grit and resilience. And so that's why the changes were made. Now, why don't we extend basic training? Well, obviously, if we could have basic training at 20 weeks or at 30 weeks or at 40 weeks or 50 weeks, would it be better? Well, of course it would. But the size and scope of the United States Army and the resources that it takes to get that done would be it'd be stupefying. It'd be incredible. You're talking about, right now we have it at 4 installations, and we have pretty well maxed out the MILCON and the ranges and the resources it takes to get that done with the throughput for 10 weeks. And we think we have it about right at 10 weeks, and that's why we have advanced individual training, because you continue off of that and the rigor that's being put back into AIT to ensure that you're getting not just the functional training, but continued repetition on those foundational tasks will ensure that every soldier, no matter what military occupational skill, gets better training through all of their initial entry training experience. But there was a specific focus on what the Army leadership and some of those combat arms skills felt was a very specific deficiency, or areas that we could improve and transform as we looked at the future soldier and what was necessary in some of those military occupational skills like infantry, armor, and potentially engineer. And sir, I don't know if that hits.
Yeah, I'll just add that. So just because we're not, there's a lot of ways to improve the rigor of training, and lengthening it is only one way, and may not be the best way. So as General Frost just described, we are improving the lethality of all soldiers and all MOSs by fielding this enhanced basic combat training. What we're also doing in the advanced individual training realm is all of our AITs if they're not there yet, they're moving hard and fast to a large-scale combat operation context, environment for their training. So I'll just give an example here. Soon after I took command, I visited one of our centers, and I watched a culminating training event there. That culminating training event was actually pretty good. They took a bunch of soldiers and a bunch of equipment, and the soldiers were trained to be sort of jack of all trades here with this equipment, and they were told, okay, here's a pile of equipment, here's what I want over there is I want a command post with a functioning network, ready, go. And that was a really pretty good, they had so many hours to get all that done. Really pretty good test. However, the culminating test was conducted inside of a building with white light and air conditioning. And as I observed this training, I said, okay, that's probably fine for the FOB environment that a headquarters might be in Iraq or Afghanistan. That is not the environment we anticipate fighting in the future. So we're going to change that culminating training event, and you can do that one, but when you're done with that one, you're going to load all that equipment up in the back of some trucks. You're going to attach some generators to the back of those trucks. You're going to drive out into the woods. You're going to wait till it gets dark, and you're going to say, okay, you're going to do it again in the dark, in the woods. Ready, go. So when they can do it in the dark, in the woods, in the rain, if you can arrange for some rain, that's good. then they're ready to graduate. So that's the kind of rigor we're applying to all of our advanced individual training. Now, I will say for the combat arms effort, you've heard the Secretary of Defense, he'll use this number, the number somewhere between 80 and 90% of our casualties in this war over the last 17 years have come from the ground combat arms, about 80% of them from the infantry. So infantry and cavalry and the engineers and the field artillerymen who accompany them. The close combat 100,000, we call it. That's where 80 to 90% of the casualties in this war have come from. That's also where we spend the least amount of money for training in our Army. So what we're doing is the Secretary of Defense has a task force, the Army has a cross-functional team that's looking at soldier lethality. It's remarkable in the course of my 36 years in uniform, it's the first time where the soldier and the small unit, the squad and platoon, have the same priority that the next airplane, the next ship, the next tank or helicopter have. So the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army have elevated the soldier and the small unit, and that's why we're starting with the infantry training, one station unit training, and we'll go to armor next, and we'll probably go to sappers, combat engineers after that.
General Evans, and this is the last question. Where are we working to inculcate the pre-commissioning source cadets across a sessions enterprise? Right now, many don't meet each other until the first unit of assignment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pete, for that question. We're looking at a couple of different things, and I don't know if General Townsend mentioned it or not, but right now the Secretary and the Chief of Staff of the Army have commissioned a panel to take a look at pre-commissioning sources. It's being chaired by retired General John Avizade. They're looking at what we're doing at OCS, they're looking at what we're doing in ROTC, and they're looking at what we're doing at the Military Academy. And what we're doing is we're trying to suggest ways to bring those cohorts together sooner, because what we find at the first unit of assignment is that often, particularly Academy graduates and ROTC lieutenants, don't have an opportunity to meet each other until well after BOLIC, and they're the first unit of assignment. So there's several different things out there that we're looking at to do that, and we're certainly eager to hear what the Avizade panel comes back with when they report out to the Secretary and the Chief. But I think that's an area where we're looking for some synergy across the accessions enterprise on the officer side.
First of all, if I could get a round of applause for the panel. Any closing comments, sir?
Yeah, I'll just say, today's panel was Building America's Army, a call to serve. And what we wanted to try to convey to you today was what we're doing to improve the accessions, the recruiting of our enlisted soldiers, and that is a big focus of our efforts because, quite honestly, that's an area where we came up a little short this year. We've also tried to tell you what we're doing to assess quality officers to lead those soldiers, and I think that's an area where things are going relatively well, but we're not letting any moss grow on us. And then third was what we're doing to train all those soldiers. Once we get them into uniform, the enlisted soldiers and those officers, what we're doing to train them so they can lead the best Army in the world, America's Army. Thanks for your attention today.
Thanks.
If you're the AFPAC hands guy, meet me up here.